Thank you for joining us for this art, architecture, and design conversation. Today's topic is Hawaii Resilience, What Comes Next? I am Bettina Maynard. I am the president and CEO of Architects Hawaii Asia. Art, architecture, and design do not shape our physical environment alone, but also the way that communities respond to change, how they prepare for challenges, and how they get ready for what's next. So tonight's topic is resilience. As Hawaii works to build a more resilient and sustainable future, it is important to maintain a clear understanding of where we are today and what that clear vision for the future needs to be. We are continuously reminded of how vulnerable we and our islands are, from climate change and coastal erosion to flooding and coral reef decline, from food systems to energy and housing attainability. Resilience must be approached holistically. It cannot sit in one office, one field, or one sector. It requires collaboration between governments, sectors such as science, design, people like community leaders, nonprofits, cultural practitioners, and all of us, maybe just residents. Tonight, our panel of distinguished leaders will explore how Hawaii can pursue resilience in a way that supports growth without eroding place and modernization without erasure of diversity. To my immediate right is Dr. Kealoha Fox, who serves as Kaho'olaua, Chief Resilience Officer of the island of Oahu. She's the Executive Director of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency for the City and County of Honolulu. She leads work across food systems, clean energy, transportation, hazard mitigation, coastal resilience, policy, and equity, helping to build sustainable communities and, amid challenge and change. It is wonderful to have you here. Kalani Ka'ana'ana is the Chief Executive Officer of Hawaii Green Growth, a statewide public-private partnership and UN-recognized local 2030 hub advancing the Aloha Plus Challenge and sustainable development goals. His work is rooted in ancestral knowledge, cultural stewardship, community-based strategy, and regenerative systems change, with a deep belief that indigenous wisdom can shape global solutions. I want to also extend a warm congratulations to you, Kalani, for being named this year's 40 under 40. So wonderful to have you here. Next to Kalani is Dr. Charles Chip Fletcher. He is the Dean of the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. For over 4 decades, his research has shaped climate policy, coastal management, and resilience planning here in Hawaii. His work continues to influence how we understand coastal risk, climate change, and the urgent decisions needed to protect our island communities. It's wonderful to have you here. And Christina Jane is the statewide coral aquatic biologist for the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resource Division of Aquatic Resources and curator of the Hawaii Coral Restoration Nursery. With more than a decade of experience in coral reef science and restoration, She leads efforts to actively restore and stabilize Hawaii's reefs in the face of increasing environmental stressors. It is wonderful to have you here. So we'll start with questions to all of the panelists. My very first one is, we often talk about resiliency in terms of individual issues like sea level rise, wildfire, housing, infrastructure, ecosystems. You get the idea. The question, where do you see the strongest intersection between your work and the work of others on this stage? Okay, not all at once.
Maybe I'll start if I could. I just want to say I feel like really underqualified with this gang, so I'm gonna like hedge my bets here a bit. But for me at Hawaii Green Growth, our work is really trying to pull together all of those threads and weave them into a tapestry. And so I think the intersection of our work really is it's actually trying to put us all in the same place. And so at Hawaii Green Growth, it's a public-private partnership. We mean that. We started with 6 government signatories: the governor, the legislature, the 4 county mayors, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, in addition to businesses, nonprofits, and residents. So really bringing all that expertise, knowledge, leverage, and love is what I do. So maybe that's how, yeah, the intersection.
Very good.
That was a great answer, and points in the same direction that I will comment that we cannot afford to stovepipe the challenges to our community, and climate change is only one. And you all know climate change consists of a whole list of hazards of various types, but we also have social inequality. And I mean, Hawaii is a highly stratified community. We have the richest of the rich and we have the houseless out there on the streets. And 52% of the families in Hawaii have been surveyed and said that they are financially challenged. Half the population here is financially challenged. And so how are we going to be a resilient community unless we lift these members, these strata, these layers of society up? So it's critical that we understand social equity as part of our solution to climate change. It's also critical that we understand problems related to disease and pollution and biodiversity loss, the destruction of natural wild places. All of these intersect with climate change, and climate change intersects and amplifies and magnifies all of these. So you talk about threads in a cloth. Absolutely, resilience has to address all of these issues, and we can't afford to stovepipe any one of them.
Thank you.
Bailina Mai. The City and County of Honolulu is a signatory of the Aloha Plus Challenge from the very beginning of Hawaii Green Growth stages, and Dean Fletcher is one of the original founding members of the city's Climate Commission. And so I think for me, my connection is not only in the work that we do, but how we work together and who we work with. And so much of that in Hawaii is about Pilina, and it's about our relationships, and it's about collective action more than any one person can do for all of the list of reasons that Chip is an expert of and studies year after year and helps us trend and analyze. At the end of the day, for me, between those bar charts and those line graphs is really about us as the people, and our concern within the City and County of Honolulu of who is going to be able to live here in the future, and how are we going to live with what level of quality of life right now. And so I think that my connection to everybody here, including the DLNR that we share the Civic Center campus with, is really a moral mandate, and it's an obligation that we cannot continue to do business as usual anymore. And we cannot continue to govern as business as usual anymore. And I think that that takes a really different perspective on how do you balance the opportunities between nonprofit and academia and government action at the same time that we're also dealing and contending with so many different shocks and stressors that are starting to show up here in Oahu within the greater Pai'aina of the Hawaiian Islands, but are certainly already very evident and prevalent across Oceania and Moana Nui Ake. And those aren't easy questions to answer, but for us, I think the easy response is that we're going to do government very differently, and that's something that we in Mayor Blangiardi's administration feel very passionately about with the time that we have had and the 2.5 years we have left in our administration. And so I hope tonight I can help to sprinkle in a little bit of the ways that we're doing our policies and our practice and our investment and our programming differently than what maybe you've seen before, not only within our county, but within other counties across the United States who are really being called to task of what are you going to do and how are we going to be able to live and invest in these conditions so that we can adapt to and live in hopefully a more Pono state in the future.
Wow, how do I follow all of that? Really lovely points from all of you. And all this discussion just makes me think of how Hawaii is known as being the most isolated archipelago in the world. So in a way, we have been isolated from many other stressors for so long, but that's no longer the case. And as you said, we cannot keep moving forward the way that we have been doing things this whole time. And coming from the environmental side of things, I mean, I think the best example of this is just look outside, look at our oceans, look at our forests. That ecosystem, like those ecosystems do not function as silos. They don't function on their own. Every part of those systems works together. And if you take out one brick, the whole thing can fall apart. So what I really see here is just that need, and we're almost being forced because of that isolation to really kind of get it together. and like we have no other option. We need to work together. We have to get all those different bricks, and we have to actually put them in the same place and actually build something. So that's kind of the first thing I think of as I look at the examples of nature and what we need to follow. That's really the guide.
Can I build on that?
Of course.
I see our isolation as both a challenge, but also an enormous benefit. If global warming has now hit 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average, that average global temperature of 1.5 consists of 0.8 C for the sea surface temperature and 2 to 3 degrees Celsius warming on the continents. The continents are already burning up. And being on a continent is extremely challenging these days. The heat dome that has settled over Spain and France the last week has been setting record temperatures. England has set record temperatures 2 days in a row. An area 4 times the size of California every year is switching from its normal environment to deep aridification. We don't call it drought anymore because drought implies a cycle that it will end. Now we're seeing permanent aridification of huge areas of the continents around the planet. The water cycle has fundamentally changed. And Hawaii, we are surrounded by an ocean that is absorbing heat, and we're suffering less than many continental areas. So our isolation is a challenge, but it's also a benefit.
Thank you. Those responses really frame the conversation for tonight. So the follow-up question to this is, so why is it important that resilience is being discussed across various disciplines rather than in separate silos?
I mean, maybe I'll just start by saying that I think for some people it's too much to handle at once. And so they maybe start in the silo because it feels the thing that they can sort of chew on in that moment. I think maybe I want to challenge the premise of your question a bit in that like discussing this isn't going to work anymore, right? And you know, I'll say this: Chip is a wonderful human, and I used to give him crap all the time because I was like, say something exciting and hopeful and happy. But he's converted me. I'm sorry, he's converted me. So I'm gonna like add to it, right? And so like, if we don't start getting real about the things that are happening, whether it's silo or unsiloed, we're not going to get anywhere. And if we're not doing something, your premise at the beginning, Bettina, perfect. Action. What are we going to do? And I hope that we can really kind of breeze through the like hot air of talking and actually decide what it is we want to do and then go do it. And I think maybe to kind of build on the reef that you started, Christina, it's like in Hawaii, our advantage, our competitive advantage is that we are so small and that everybody knows everybody, right? To add to what Kealoha was saying, right? And so like in that way, if we decide that we want to do something, and we have, right, in the Aloha Plus Challenge, those are community-driven initiatives that became shared goals. Now we have the shared goals. What are we doing to like address them? And so we also have a dashboard, and the dashboard is meant to keep us accountable and transparent about what we're doing and what we're not doing. You know which of the 6 goals is all red? Solid waste reduction. Our community said we want a 70% reduction in solid waste, not even an inch on that metric. So, right, like I think discuss, fine, pow, discuss, what we're gonna do.
I have something exciting and hopeful to say.
I wanna hear it first. Turn the cameras on.
Hawaii has all the elements we need to solve the problem for ourselves and show the rest of the world how to solve the problems. Earth is, after all, an island in the sea of space, and no one's coming to rescue us. Hawaii is underpinned by an indigenous foundation of an ethic related to the land and has lessons to teach the whole world. If we can just unleash that here at home, if we can unleash the Ahupua'a Konehiki system, if we can give farmers access to all that open land that's out there and subsidize them, because farming is a razor-thin economy, a razor-thin way to make a living. We need to turn farming into a business in which families are competing to join. Uncover the Kuleana families that are out there that are still working the land in their ahupua'a and that have been doing it for generations. Uncover the indigenous knowledge that they have and that they know so well. Release them from the heavy permitting burden that we subject other profit-based companies to go through, which is very appropriate, but it's not appropriate for Kuleana families and other organizations that want to work the land so that we can have food sovereignty. We need to become sovereign in so many different ways. We need energy sovereignty. We need food sovereignty. We need to care for our water. And the lessons that we can learn from centuries of knowledge here in the islands, if we can uncover that and supplement it, support it, we can show the rest of the world how this planet can host communities of people that can thrive in this very dangerous future rather than suffer.
Great panel. Mahalo. Can I also maybe share another quote from you? And this one actually was something that really still sits with me. It was from Climate Lab. Hope is found in action.
Optimism is found in action. Optimism.
Wow.
Hope implies someone else is going to take care of it. Optimism is what we engender in ourselves when we take some action. You forget about feeling dismal if you're doing something constructive. So everybody getting involved is the key to building community optimism.
I think that's where we're succeeding right now, is that community action that has created really tremendous results, right? So my agency was created 10 years ago by people like you and me who voted to create this office and create a opportunity for the counties to have a say in what our climate resilient futures look like. Then in the last charter amendment, it was within my office that you folks, including myself, voted for the first ever climate resiliency fund This was before the green fee. And for folks in this room, like Chris Benjamin, who have been really behind and stewarding these efforts at all levels of government, I would say that really that's part of the way that you can see that we're de-siloing the work constantly, right? So we're making these policy shifts together, but we're also doing it through the power of the people. And people power, I believe, is completely fueled by hope and optimism. And I don't actually see a lot of us in Hawaii activated through fear and scarcity. I actually see us being really motivated by all of those positive affects that you had just mentioned, and all of those systems that are really interreliant on one another, that we have data and information, but we also have stories and we have memory of right here for us to take advantage of. And I believe that's why so many of us in this room have started to push for these shifts. And we absolutely refuse to not have policies that represent what we truly believe in our own homes, in our own businesses, in our own schools, to make sure that it's being reflected in these acts, in these regulations, and in these laws, because we have to really think about it in some of those ways too. And so I think that's, I'm hopeful that that is where we can have much more optimism too, is because it's one of the places that Hawaii and all of our counties has actually really led the charge on, especially across the United States, is in our ability to codify the power and the will of the people.
Yeah, to add to that, I think I'm young, but in the past, several years, I won't say decades, we have really seen so much momentum, so much of that optimism, and not just folks talking, but wanting to take action, to do, which is so incredibly important. And I think, I'll speak on behalf of, the younger generation, that there are so many students that I see, so many young people who are just ready to jump in, and they want to see those changes, and they're actively like, well, I want to do this, and I'm motivated, and I want to go find out how do I get involved in this office? How do I get involved and learn about the rulemaking process? It sounds boring, but really, like, there's so much optimism there, and it really does give me like it gives me a lot of hope. But just seeing that there are folks who also are taking, maybe what you think of as baby steps, but I think we are at that point where we're bringing the silos, we're bringing the baby step kind of stages together and creating that larger movement.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I couldn't agree more, and I think we're seeing some of the most optimism and hope, absolutely, across generations. And for me, I was really excited tonight because one of our sustainability fellows is here. Kyla is here, and she's a rising senior, and she could be doing anything else. Yeah. She could be doing anything else on a Thursday night during her summer, and she's choosing to be here, and she's choosing to be a part of these conversations. But moreover, she's choosing to spend 8 hours a day in our office learning the ins and outs of how does this actually work? Like, what are the mechanics behind this? And I believe that it's going to be young women like Kyla, like Christina, that are going to be able to not only usher in very different types of work that we do, whether it's the protection and the rebuilding of our coral reefs, or if it's the establishment of better building benchmarks and the way that we emit a lot of emissions out of our built environment here. I think it's also going to be about like the characteristics and the values and the traits that we bring to the work too, that we're not sitting here competing against one another. I think what you really are seeing is a genuine reflection of actually what partnership and collaboration looks like in action each and every day behind the scenes. And I think it's something to be celebrated about, especially the sustainability sector. We genuinely are all friends. This is not a scarcity complex at all. And I don't see us competing for resources, and I actually see us pleading with one another and with others to join us in that work ahead. And I think that that's something that we also need to celebrate in our particular sector, is we're doing the work together, and that I think the next generation is really seeing that, because I see that whether it's career development or workplace development, nobody wants to be a part of a place that is, you're just going to like melt behind a computer and behind the scenes, and you don't know if anybody's ever going to read that report or that assessment any other day if you work on it or if you don't. And I think that that's something that our sector is really pushing forward within the activation of all of this really great knowledge and data that we have to support where we need to go.
If I can add to that really quick, I think building that capacity, like building up, the next generation, but just more folks learning about this and joining the sector, growing the sector, because we do need more people working on this. We need all of you. We need everybody, because this is so vitally important. This is not something that we can leave for someone else to deal with. We need to take that action. Yeah. Go ahead.
Bettina's not going to get to ask any questions.
I just
I think one kind of thing I want to just say is that, in that idea of building capacity and asking people to join this work. Sorry, we're looking over here, but we should talk to you guys too. I think for me, it's like you don't have to leave something to come do this work. Do it where you're at. And I don't know what you all do. I know some of you. Hi, guys. But for wherever you are, there is always something to be done. So I'm looking, I see one of my mentors in the back here. He can make decisions and policies about how funds get distributed, right? What is it called, Terry? The resilience thing you just stood up the fund? Stronger Hawaiʻi Fund, right? He can make a policy decision like that makes us more ready when the next thing does happen. Now the money's ready to rock and roll. We learn from Maui, right? So like wherever you are and whatever you're doing, there's something to be done.
It's wonderful to hear all of you talk about optimism. Not a word that I thought all four of you would say in the first 10 minutes. This is awesome. You talk about community, and Hawaii is often praised for its strong sense of community. But the events, recent events have also shown how vulnerable we are. So the question is, what do you think that this moment is asking us?
I think this moment is asking us to get out of our box, to really challenge ourselves as individuals in our personal lives, as employees in our offices and divisions and companies, and as members of our families. Challenge ourselves to really sit down and think, all right, I want to do things differently because I recognize and accept that the world is changing and has changed already. And one thing you might realize is that you're here because you love Hawaii, right? The other day, I didn't mean to elicit a bunch of laughs, but I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and you don't hear people around Pittsburgh saying, I really love it here. But in Hawaii, everybody's here because you want to be here, because you love it here. Well, if you love this place, you have to get involved. You have to dig in. And to dig in properly, you need to learn, and then you need to do. What is it that we can all think creatively and in a new and fresh way about that moves like a tsunami in the same direction that we've been talking about? And can you share this with somebody so that you're not doing it alone? And can the group of you bring an entire large group in the same direction? So let's get outside of the noise in our head and the boxes that we live in, and let's read, and let's really raise awareness in ourselves of some of the details that we're talking about here. And let's imagine together what a new tomorrow can look like.
I'd add that I think the moment is asking us to wise up. Sorry, I just heard my mother in my head. And I think that that's maybe the first thing, but maybe something also that's really specific is we need to start challenging some of these tropes and this language that we hear about the problems and really challenge them, right? You hear, oh, kids don't want to farm. I just spent 2 months ago with Future Farmers of America. Those kids are revving to go. They love it. FFA is their jam. How do we actually empower them to do it, right? So how do we challenge the tropes and the language and the words that we're hearing? Because it's not always true. And let's put our words into something and let's feed that energy. Kolelo no keola, kolelo no kamake. How do we feed into the things that actually bring us life and resilience and thriving? And let's start feeding those narratives and let's starve the narratives that actually don't serve us.
I think of preparedness, not just, for storms like the Kona lows and some of the other impacts that we've had recently, but, well, one, you can never be too prepared. But I also just think of preparedness not just for environmental impacts, for storms or flooding or having your hurricane kit in your house, but preparedness for what is to come and what we need to do to reach that point. Preparedness for, okay, well, we want to start getting down on that solid waste reduction. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for the average person? What do they need to do so that we can start working on those numbers? That's the first thing that pops to my mind is just you can never be too ready. You can never be too ready for environmental impacts, but you can never be too ready for change that you want to see happen.
All of you talk about, I'm going to shift a little bit. All of you talk about how special Hawaii is. So how can we pursue modernization, which I don't think that can be stopped, or we would want to stop that. Economic growth that comes with it, climate adaptation, while we remain grounded in our indigenous values and our local sense of place.
Well, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive at all. I'm going to challenge you on economic growth, though.
He has a handout. I just want you to know in the back.
Is growth really
You have
necessary?
homework.
So a couple of reports just came out in the last 2 weeks, a roadmap for eradicating poverty beyond growth. In other words, what if GDP was not the measure of a successful society? What if instead we came up with an economic model that valued a living tree more than a dead one? An economic model that gave actual value to future generations, an economic model that gave actual value to sustainability in the way that you do business. And here's another one, a global justice report, a plan for equity and prosperity within planetary boundaries. This stuff is catching fire around the world. The United Nations is dealing with these issues real time. So going to the global stage for just a second, it is this growth narrative, a economic model, which is an outgrowth of 500 years of imperialism, colonialism, slavery, where a group of elites in Europe strip mined the tropical and southern hemisphere lands, resulting in enormous deforestation and destruction, indigenous erasure, all for the purpose of gaining profit, which leads to privilege, which leads to this whole idea that because of wealth, we're not affected by the problems that we're causing around the world. So we need a new economic model. We need a new mindset, which is not based on profit and privilege, but instead it's based on actual sustainability. Where would that seem, what sort of living laboratory can you think of where we could try that out? How about an island or a group of islands that are far away from the influence of continents. What if we were to truly throw off the influence of continents here in Hawaii and truly embrace our indigenous heritage with a fully digital, modern, and progressive community? It doesn't mean we're going to go back and all have to wear malo cloths. It means that it's about values. It's about values. It's not about living in some primitive fashion. It's totally about what you value, and can you really express that in the way that you do business and the way that you live your life?
For those who are unfamiliar, with my background in work, I didn't start necessarily in climate. So in my family, I started training in our oihana mauliola, in our traditional Hawaiian medicines and medicinal practices. And what I, continue to learn and be a student of and have unikied from, these kahuna and these kumu who continue to instill this knowledge and this kuleana within me is that if the optimal state for us is to live in a state of pono, right? To live in a state of balance, live in a state of righteousness, not only within ourselves, but within one another and with our connection to the environment, then we have to create the conditions for that every minute of every single day of every year for every generation and every millennia thereafter. And I think one of the things that I continue to always share when I get the opportunity and privilege to be in a space like this with all of you who are just doing such tremendous work in each of your fields and each of your positions is that for us, Indigenous knowledge has always been at the forefront, and it's always been at the cutting edge of innovation and modernization, and we have far too many examples. And for me, my realm has always been in health, it's always been in medicine. We are nowhere close in the entire field of medicine, whether it's pharmacology, whether it's chronic disease management, whether it's tertiary care. We are nowhere near the level of intellect and wisdom and ike that Indigenous people have had about medicine and about the way that not only do we heal our own bodies, but how do we heal our minds and our spirits, and how we have a real effect on people and the land and the resources around us. And that's something that I spent all of these years, I did the right things, I graduated from the John A. Burns School of Medicine, and you just realize when you step back that none of this curricula, none of these textbooks, none of these reports can even begin to hold all of that knowledge that our people continue to perpetuate and continue to teach and pass down, sometimes in very direct ways, but oftentimes in very indirect observations and behaviors and feelings that you can't even put words or dictionaries to yet. And so for me, I approach climate change and the work for resiliency and sustainability within that lens of we barely know anything yet, to be quite honest. And if we have a chance in any of the work that we do, and I think we're calling you to action of whatever your position is, please find a way for it to be pono and find a way for you to bring pono to others too.
Maybe I'd add too that like Indigenous knowledge is not stagnant, right? And we're all learning, and we've been given and gifted this sort of ancestral memory that helps us be in tune with and sense and feel, but it has to be in tune to what we're experiencing in the context we are today. Like our kupuna didn't experience what we're experiencing now, but we have the tools, right? We have the know-how. And so I guess I just want to say that like Indigenous knowledge is sometimes put in a box of like a rear view mirror, and it's like this thing that we got to go back to. Please don't make me wear a malo. No. But it's debatable. But again, this knowledge is not stagnant. How do you apply it in the current context? And then to your point, Bettina, like, no, I don't. I love my iPhone. Like, it has its challenges, but I don't want to give it up, right? And so, like, how do we then live in right relationship with the environment and each other, understanding these new challenges are different?
I love that. I'll add on from I look at coral every day. So in the Kumulipo, the coral, koa, is actually one of the first organisms created. I believe it's line 16, way in the beginning. And I think that really speaks to how coral is an ancestral organism. The coral polyp, coral's an animal, if you're not familiar, and it forms the tiniest little polyp, looks like a little anemone, and that is the tiny individual coral. They all live together, form a coral colony, and that is what builds our reefs. Like, they're often called the ecosystem engineers. And so that tiny little polyp is the foundation of this entire incredible, complex ecosystem. And that's our ancestral organism, the coral. And I think that really just speaks to how important and how valued just a tiny basic animal like a coral is in Indigenous knowledge, and how that was recognized as being so incredibly important. And, you know, as everyone else has shared, Indigenous knowledge is not just oh yeah, that was something that happened way back when. But modern science is just trying to catch up to that knowledge. Like, not even close. But that is where we're at, is that we are trying to catch up. And how do we take, the question for us really is, we have Western science, you know, I come from a science background. How do we turn that into Pono science, or just Pono living, not even science, minus the science? Like, how are we going to move forward with that? I think is the question that we need to ask ourselves.
It's absolutely fascinating. I have questions for each one of you, and I want to stay with you, Christina. How do healthy reefs contribute to Hawaii's overall resiliency?
That's a fantastic question, because I get to brag about coral reefs and all that they do. So I'm excited. Buckle in. Really, though, like I said before, our coral reefs, the corals that make up the reefs, are ecosystem engineers. Our coral reefs are not, they're not just out there doing nothing. They are infrastructure. They are living, natural infrastructure. And a healthy coral reef can dissipate up to 97% of wave energy. So that's preventing that huge wave from crashing on our shorelines and contributing to shoreline erosion. If I believe the annual number is somewhere above $800 million a year that coral reefs prevent in flood damage alone. And if those reefs crumble down if we just lose about 3 feet of those reefs, that number skyrockets to over $1 billion in flood damage that our reefs are actively preventing every year. And also Waikiki would be underwater. I mean, I could talk about coral reefs all day, but let alone the infrastructure part. I mean, they're also providing habitat for our fishes, which is also a food source, part of our sustainability of being able to get food from our reefs. I mean, I could go on for the rest of the night about how important our reefs are. But I think the main takeaway is that they're living infrastructure, and they are so unique in that they can repair themselves. As long as we stop breaking them, they'll be there and they'll continue to protect our shorelines and our vulnerable areas of our coastline. I'll stop, or else I'll keep going.
No, actually don't. So what are the biggest threats to our coral reefs?
Oh no, I could keep going for this one too. I think there's maybe two different categories of threats to our coral reefs. You hear a lot about climate change, of course, and our warming oceans. So what you may hear about coral bleaching, when the coral turns white, it's not actually dead. When it is white, it can recover, but it's in a very vulnerable state. It's basically really stressed. And so that if something else happens, if there's another stressor added on top of that coral, that's when our corals can die. So that kind of goes into the second category of threats is just anthropogenic impacts, mostly from land, especially in Hawaii. Our reefs are super unique. Not only are they some of the slowest growing corals in the world, a lot of our corals, they grow less than 1 inch in a year. So if something like an anchor gets dragged on top of them, if we have boat groundings, you just, chopped off a bunch of coral that was decades, if not hundreds of years old for the big ones. I was diving on an anchor damage site not too long ago, and it looked like someone had taken a weed whacker and weed whacked the reef. There was coral that was flipped over, just broken in pieces. There's this, I remember this one coral colony. It's of this beautiful branching species of coral called antler coral. And there's a lot of baby fish that like to live in these coral. And the coral colony just looks like it had gotten exploded. It was just all these tiny little pieces. And then I saw these two, they were so cute, two little baby damselfish that was their house. And they were just swimming over on top of it, on top of all the broken pieces, because they didn't have anywhere to go. That was their home, and they were just lost. So corals like that, I mean, how will that recover? So sorry, I better stop talking.
We don't have tissues.
But it's those kinds of things, sedimentation, physical damages that are often coming up Mauka through the entire watershed, and the reef is at the end. It's at the end of the pipe. So it gets everything that comes down.
Thank you. Kealoha, in your capacity as Oahu's Chief Resilience Officer, what do you think are the most urgent resilience priorities for Honolulu right now?
It's a big question that I contend with every single day. And right now I'm in the middle of, I feel like, 2 real seasonal changes to even, reflect on that question myself. So this is the end of the fiscal year. Fiscal end closes at 4:30 next Tuesday. And that's a really, really big deal right now, because at the City and County of Honolulu, we don't yet have an operating budget passed for fiscal year 27. And at the same time, it's an auspicious time of year for me as a Kanaka Maoli, because we just had our summer solstice this past weekend. And happy Father's Day to everyone in the room who is a father and a grandfather and a godfather, because that element of who we are in our day lives really come to bear when you do this work each and every day like we do. I mean, so I take these times, right, out of the year, and I really reflect on questions like this, really to start to better my work and to make sure that I'm the right leader at the right time doing this right mission in the position that I hold. And for Honolulu right now, I think we're really holding a very difficult dichotomy of space where our ability to create a more sustainable island in future is often pitted at odds, particularly in our narratives, around affordability. And I don't believe, and many of us can tell you all of the science and the data and the economics around it, I don't believe that it doesn't serve any of us, but it's also part of those mistruths that Kalani had said earlier, that we have to continue to really confront and demystify now, because we can absolutely do both simultaneously. And I think that is something that's really facing the counties head on right now, and I think is also facing our state departments as well. I haven't worked in the state since I fled in 2019 because it was a really tough administration in 2019. And I was watching things being erased and rolled back and ignored and breached that my elders and my mentors and my bosses had worked their whole lives for. And you watch how quickly some of that can unravel. And I find that that is so much about what I'm doing right now, again, in June 2026, as part of my work, unfortunately, is really trying to find the spaces where the erasure and the ignorance continues to still perpetuate from the administration into the state and county governments. And so for me, when we talk about sustainability and we couple that with affordability, in the middle of that is truly, I think it's the political pressure that we're really under as well, where at the local government level, at the municipal level, we're being tasked to do a huge amount of work, which we have an obligation and we have a mandate to do. But at the same time, you sit in these positions and you watch as federal agency after federal agency and program after program continues to retreat on their obligations. And then the burden gets placed back for local action. And that's very, very difficult in my position to watch, but it's personally deeply harmful to me because I'm part of a cycle of negative perpetuation once again. There are times in my day where I find myself back in August of 2019 where I was burning out and saying, I don't think I can do this anymore. And this just doesn't seem like the space and the time for me to be able to give my gifts and talents here. And I really feel for everybody who's been impacted by this. And it's not just our sectors. It's health, it's education, it's housing. It's so many of us. And I'm very fearful that if we don't come together and stop the dichotomy and that siloing of the work that you asked us before, where we might end up in 2029 or 2030 is not going to be the greatest hazards of some of the work that both Christina and Chip are talking about tonight. I think some of the greatest hazards that we're going to face is actually how we face one another and some of the decisions that we made and some of the decisions that we stood by and watched along the way. And I think that's really difficult to contend with at the same time where somebody like me is like somebody like Kalani of like, but it's about action. It's about what can I do today and what can we do for this particular project, right? I mean, we're very action oriented. And so that's how I find like my bright spots throughout the day. And that's something that I'm deeply reflecting on right now at the end of the fiscal year. And as we change through the ala nui right now out of into the peak of our summer is it's being able to find any type of action that I can and just give my gifts and strengths and talents to that. And if that's one metaphor of what the light and promise that one person can bring, I'm hoping that that translates to a greater medicine, if you will, for what each of us could do for greater resiliency. And I hope that where we find ourselves as a community of resilience people is someplace better than we're at right now when it comes to some of the policy decisions that are getting made.
Thank you. You mentioned measurable outcomes, and here is a question for you, Kalani. How can we, because you mentioned the dashboard early on, let's talk about that a little bit. how can we move from these broad commitments to a more measurable outcome?
Yeah, maybe this is maybe not the answer. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, whatever. We're good to them. Kealoha, I think one of the things that you exemplify for me is that leadership is not to be confused with authority, right? It's not a position and a title that you hold that empowers you to exercise leadership. And so maybe the challenge that I have to all of you is that wherever you are and whatever you do and whatever level you think you are, that leadership sometimes is asking a brave question. That leadership can be so many other things than holding a title and feeling like, oh, I'm a CEO, so now I have leadership, right? No. Leadership starts everywhere. It's that janitor that picks up that rubbish, that says good morning to you every morning, that always starts every day with a smile. That's leadership, right? It changes the culture of the place, sets a tone and an energy for a place. And so I think this idea of how do we move from broad commitments like the Aloha Plus Challenge into measurable, like tangible action, it really starts with leadership. And again, that point about leadership is not authority, that it's something that all of us can exercise wherever we are. I think the other part of it is just candor and directness, right? Like the data and tracking and having a way to measure where we're at against those shared goals is really important because it helps keep us honest. And when we're honest, I think we can save time because we're not gonna like get through the fluffy stuff and add more hot air to all of this. Look, we have a dump on the west side of this island that kills more Native Hawaiians than anything else probably. I don't have the stats, you guys check that, but it causes cancer, right? Like the proportion of Native Hawaiians near the dump in Waianae or Nanakuli, I don't know, is that Nanakuli? Sorry, I'm a Kailua guy. What is that? Nanakuli, mahalo, right? Has higher rates of cancer. So if we have a shared commitment to reduce waste, solid waste by 70%, and we're not doing it, it has health impacts, it has equity impacts, it has all the things we've been tagging on to each other the whole night. But again, the candor and the directness of where we're at is important. The transparency and the accountability, I think, is important to drive action. So maybe I'll pause there with those two.
Thank you. Chip, what gives you hope? Looking into the future. This is a Chip question.
You're really pushing it this evening, Bettina. I've addressed that question 3 times already this evening. I'll tell you what gives me hope is the people of Hawaii. That's where I get hope.
Well, that was a lot quicker than I thought.
You have to find another question now.
We have 12 pages of questions. Thank you for everybody who submitted your questions early tonight, too.
You guys give me some stress with some of
I
them.
prepared for all these questions you got me, and you haven't asked me any of them yet.
We didn't even touch a quarter of them. I wanna have one question for everybody at the end, and I can't find it. So
Can I maybe do something?
I do wanna ask all of you about what was my last question? It doesn't matter. What is one thing that you would like to share with this group here, based on what we're talking about in the grand scheme of things? What is one thing we can walk away with tonight that helps communities, that helps resilience? I mean, one thing. It was not a hard question.
I'll go first.
Yes.
I think everybody can do something, and I think the mindset shift, if you need that shift, is the most important thing that you can do and that you can share with folks around you. A lot of times people ask me a similar question specific for coral reefs, like, well, what can I do to help the coral, besides wear reef safe sunscreen? And oftentimes it's these big issues like climate change that can kind of make you feel helpless, like, oh, this is such a big problem. Maybe you feel like I can't really do anything about that. but I'd like to remind you that any little thing helps, and all of those little actions that we all take together truly do add up, and we'll see them on the dashboard. I think that would be my biggest takeaway, is that if you can find those small things that you can do in your daily life and you encourage other people, I mean, that's how change happens. Like, don't feel like you can't do anything.
I'm gonna pull a Kalani, and for me, it's really hard for me to sit and continue to ask folks to do more and to change something. I feel it could be the practitioner in me, and it could also be the mother in me. There's a deep discomfort, I think, when you're in spaces as magnificent as this and inspired as much as we are in Hawaii by everything that Chip had named, for us to be the ones to challenge one another and point a finger in a room and say, what more can you be doing? Because I will tell you, we're doing it. I really, really think that we are. And when I step back and I think about telling anybody else with whatever you're going through in your life, whatever hardships you might be facing when you drive home tonight, or whatever faces you in the morning, I'm just one of those people that feels pretty deeply uncomfortable of challenging somebody else to do better or to increase something. But I will say that with that, at the same time, I'm one of those people that absolutely holds my heart and my hands open, that if you want to work together and if you want somebody to support and lift you up, if you're having a hard time figuring something out in one of your initiatives and you have a blockage in one of the strategies that you've been working on, particularly if that might be impacted by something that we're doing poorly at the county, then call on me for that. I'm not going to pontificate or to patronize anybody in this room or in any other space to tell you what you ought to be doing. But if you're looking for a helping hand, and if you're somebody that is willing to reach out for kokua and to spend time together and maybe build a connection, then I want to be your person for that. And so I forgive me, but I just had to kind of reframe a little bit, because I think I'm just staring at people that are just so beautiful and brilliant. And if you're working in the arts, and if you're working in design, and you're working in architecture and engineering, all fields of work that I'm deeply inspired by. I had a whole hour-long meeting with my team today because I was so inspired by a color palette. And I needed to get out of spreadsheets so much. And if that's the work that you do, then please, I need to be asking you what I should be doing differently, because I found so much joy in a color Pantone that I didn't even know the names of, because colors have magical names to them nowadays. And if you're building spaces that hold people, yeah, I know I need to go study the books. If you're holding spaces where people feel loved and safe and secure, and you're making a quality of life better for any of us in Hawaii, then I should be asking you what I could be doing better.
Are we coming down towards the end of this? Yes. Okay, because I can no longer hold back the climate scientist in me.
Perfect.
And I just think I want to just throw a little bucket of cold water on all this for a minute. And you're going to have to bring us home, Kalani.
Okay.
Yeah.
So noted.
I'm going to take us down, and then you're going to pull us back up, all right?
You got it.
So every year, humanity releases on the order of 35 to 38 billion tons of CO2, and that's the long-lived greenhouse gas that's the real problem. Half of that, nature takes care of every year. About 25 to 30% is dissolved in the ocean. It causes problems, but it's being pulled out of the air. And then on the continents, photosynthesis pulls another 25 to 30% out. So only about half of our CO2 emissions end up trapping heat, causing global warming. Nature takes care of the other half. Well, in 2023, nature didn't. And for the first time that we're aware of, nature did not absorb any of our CO2 from the atmosphere. One reason is that because as water gets warmer, it holds less dissolved gas. And so the ocean, with marine heat waves, is absorbing less and less of our CO2. Another reason is that photosynthesis has a thermal limit. At 104 degrees Fahrenheit, plants begin to experience permanent damage, and they stop absorbing CO2 and they start releasing it in what's known as respiration. They release CO2. And in 2023, those effects, plus the Canadian wildfires, resulted in 0 carbon being absorbed by nature. And this is nature at the edge of a cliff that we have pushed it to because of only 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, a very little amount of warming. But we're on the threshold of some serious erosion to the pillars of our world. The ocean circulation is slowing. The Congo and the Amazon rainforests are teetering on the edge of tipping points. Nature itself is no longer pulling carbon out of the air like it used to, buffering our bad action. So feel motivated and through the fear that I'm trying to instill in you right now, because it's bad out there, folks. We move from air-conditioned room to air-conditioned room, and we don't fully appreciate that things are getting worse and worse out there. All right, Kalani, now pull us back out of that, all right?
I was going to say, do we have time to do the ocean thing and the turning thing, and it's going to slow down? It takes like 1,800 years. Can we do that one?
Really?
Yeah.
So there are 2 types of circulation in the ocean. There's surface gyres, surface circulation. There are 5 big gyres: North Pacific, North Atlantic, South Pacific, South Atlantic, and Indian, and they're driven by the trade winds. So these gyres carry heat from the tropics up towards the Arctic and distribute heat around the planet. But there's another type of ocean circulation called vertical circulation that's referred to as the conveyor belt. And when surface waters convect down in the North Atlantic and also in the Southern Ocean by Antarctica, they carry warm water on a 1,800-year-long journey, and it's thermally expanding the whole time. And thermal expansion is the major driver of sea level rise. So for 1,800 years, we're going to have sea level rise. It's inevitable. It cannot be stopped at this point. Sea level rise is a permanent condition, and our coastal management tools are not up to the task yet. Every coastal community is struggling how to figure out the encroaching ocean. And in the back of everybody's mind is a little bit of hope that maybe this will stop. It's a permanent condition. Was that what you wanted?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, one more ask. Bettina, what was the question?
I'm too depressed to think.
I got us. But what was the question?
Go make something up. Save us from
What was
this.
the one thing.
What are you
What?
hopeful about?
No, okay. I thought it was like, what's the one thing you want to tell everybody tonight? Is that it?
We need more than one thing now.
Got to be uplifting.
No, it's right on the wall. I want everybody to look on the wall.
Aloha.
I love you. And I mean that because I think of each of you, whether I know you or not, every day that I do this work. And I think if each of us can bring that same level of care and compassion to the work that you do with the larger goal in mind of addressing all the scary things that Chip just mentioned, we're going to be okay. And so aloha is the answer.
Nice. I love that.
This was a wonderful panel. We all needed to hear this, and I am humbled and deeply appreciative of all of you spending your time with all of us. Thank you to most wonderful, insightful panel. Thank you.
Okay.